Welcome to this episode of the Uncharted Sounds podcast. And today we have a bit of a special for you. But before I do that, you'll be pleased to know that I'm still joined by my good mate Noel. How you doing, Noel?
Very good, mate. Looking forward to this.
Brilliant. So today's special, Noel, is that we are going to be talking to Steve Diggle from the Buzzcocks. Now, what I thought we'd do, as you can imagine, they've been around since 1976, so they've got a huge history, and we couldn't possibly try and cover all of that in the time before we speak to Steve. So I just thought what we'd try and do is pick out some sort of key highlights over the last number of years.
Fantastic. And I've also done a little bit of research on a few gigs. Only not. If I did all of it, we'd be here all day. In fact, they've played over 1,500 gigs, including festivals across Europe, USA, Canada, Australia, Japan and Russia. So I think it could be a very long episode if I told you every gig, but I won't. I'll just chip in a few little bits here and there along the way.
Okay. And as I said, we've got Steve coming on a bit later on in the episodes. So who are the Buzzcocks? I'm sure many of our listeners will know that, but for those that don't, they're an English punk rock band that the singer-songwriter-guitarist Pete Shelley and singer-songwriter Howard Devoto formed in Manchester in 1976. Now, Howard Devoto left the band in 1977 and formed the band Magazine. And after that point, Pete Shelley became the principal singer-songwriter. And that led to a classic, what is considered to be the classic lineup of the Buzzcocks, which was Pete Shelley, Steve Diggle on guitar, Steve Garvey on bass, and John Maher on drums. And they recorded the Buzzcocks' first three albums: Another Music in a Different Kitchen, Love Bites, and A Different Kind of Tension. They actually got back together again in '89 and released 6 more albums before Pete Shelley sadly passed away in 2018, only aged 63.
Shocking that. Yeah.
As of 2019, the band now consists of Steve Diggle, Danny Farron, and Chris Remington, and there's a touring member, Manny Perazzoli, and they all got together to release the band's 10th album, Sonics in the Soul, in 2022. And they released one of the compilation albums, and sometimes in the music business, there's a compilation album that is seen as being, the absolute pinnacle of a band. And the Buzzcocks released an album called Singles Going Steady, and it's seen as one of those albums. I think has often been described as a bit of a punk masterpiece. So
yeah, I mean, every track is phenomenal, isn't it? Brilliant.
I thought it'd be interesting just to see a little bit more about Steve Diggle, particularly. Now, the acknowledged Bible of Buzzcocks is a book called The Complete History, written by a guy called Tony McGartland. I thought I'd just read a bit because there's a particularly fascinating bit about how Steve Diggle came to be a part of the band. If we go into them, this is June the 4th in 1976. So the Sex Pistols were playing the Lesser Free Trade Hall in Manchester, and the Buzzcocks were due to support them on that and to make their debut. But actually, they didn't actually have a bass player or a drummer, so they couldn't do that. So their place was filled by a band called the Mandala Band from Blackburn. And that show played to about 100 people, each paying 50p, which sounds like a bargain, doesn't it?
Absolute bargain.
So Steve Diggle had arranged to meet a guitarist outside the venue, apparently unaware of what was going on inside. The Sex Pistols manager, Malcolm McLaren, was sort of rounding up kids inside, of which Steve Diggle was one of those. Now, Pete Shelley had already formed the Buzzcocks with Howard Devoto. He was doorman for the evening, and Steve Diggle introduced himself to Pete and saying he was a bass player wanting to form a band, and then Shelley then introduced him to Howard Devoto. Now, the very next day, June the 5th, Howard Devoto called Steve Diggle and asked him to attend a rehearsal the following day, and that's where the rest, of course, as they say, is history. And then, literally on July the 20th, they made their full debut, I guess you'd call it, at the back at the Leicester Free Trade Hall, once again supporting the Sex Pistols.
Yeah, that was interesting. They supported them, and actually on the bill was also Slaughter and the Dogs at that gig as well. So in '77, actually, they did a couple of other gigs. Actually, I'll mention as I'm on a roll. So they played a gig in the Rainbow Theatre in London, which I saw a couple of gigs at, a few gigs at, by the Jam and by the Stranglers. But this particular gig they attended, the lineup was incredible. It was the Clash, the Jam, the Buzzcocks, the Subway Sect, and the Prefects. I mean, what a lineup, eh?
That's a cracking
That's
lineup.
incredible. And also, they also played the classic, famous punk special at the 100 Club in London, which was over 2 days and included Susie and the Banshees, the Sex Pistols, and the Damned as well. And obviously, we heard about that from Richard Jobson when we interviewed him with the Skids. So yeah, classic events.
So do you know how they got their name, Noel? Buzzcocks?
Well, I assumed the name The Vibrators was already taken, so it was kind of that, but maybe not.
Well, it actually comes from the Manchester slang term cock, meaning youngster.
Okay.
It was used in the 1970s. There was an ITV drama called Rock Follies, and they had like the catchphrases, "That's the Buzzcock," and "Give me a Buzzcock."
Oh, okay.
So apparently comes from that. The Buzzcocks in '77, they released on their own independent label, the New Hormones, the Spiral Scratch EP.
Boredom.
Yeah, being a record collector myself and been to lots of record fairs, that's one of those that's a little bit sought after, you know.
Now that independent label, there was another band at the time called the Saints on Fatal Records, also independent, and they released "I'm Stranded."
Yeah, the Saints were great. They were an Australian punk band, and they had a great song called "This Perfect Day."
It is a great song. So, bit of a fun fact for you: the track "Shot by Both Sides" by Magazine and "Lipstick" by the Buzzcocks is actually the same riff. And then back end of '77, the band, having already released an EP on their own label, they actually signed to United Artists. So they released "Orgasm Addict" and "What Do I Get," which got to number 37 in the charts.
I just wanna love her like any other. What do I get? I only want a friend who stay to the end. What do I get? What do I get? Oh, what do I get? What do I get? Oh, what do I get? I'm in distress, I need a caress. What do I get? I'm a maker, I just need a break. What do I get? What do I get? Oh, what do I get? What do I get? Oh, what do I get? I only get sleepless nights alone here in my heart to bed. The interest in the time I tried. It's always that only happened to me instead. What do I get?
They then released, as I said, their first album, Another Music in a Different Kitchen, and that came with its own carrier bag with the word product on, which has been re-released many times. So you then get to, and if you go like 78 to 79, they had 5 chart-hitting singles, and probably the most famous of that was "Ever Fallen in Love," which got to number 12. between 78 and 79, they also released their second album, Love Bites, was released in October 78, and in October 79, A Different Kind of Tension, their third album, was released. Probably it was mixed reviews from the critics, a bit unfairly really, because it had some great songs on it. Sitting Around at Home, Say You Don't Love Me, as amongst some of them. But it was like the third album to be released in such a short period of time. And the quality of those tracks on all three albums is so high that it's hard to get your head around the consistency of that product.
And to be actually panned by some critics, as you said, is I mean, they were still really building their reputation, really. I mean, in 78, they toured Europe supporting Blondie. And in 79, they did a big UK tour with another massive Manchester band, Joy Division, supporting them. So they were still building to get to the point that they were doing so much in such a short amount of time. To suddenly be knocked back, this must have been a blow.
Well, when you then move into 1980, where they had three more singles: Why She's a Girl from the Chain Store, Airwaves Dream, and Running Free. They actually then sort of disbanded in 1981, albeit they'd recorded some demos for a fourth album. Between 76 and 81, that's sort of often seen by some purists, not myself, as being like the sort of pinnacle period of the Buzzcocks history, if you like, And they both went on to Steve and Pete Shelley both went on to solo careers. Pete Shelley had Homo Sapien, XL1, Heaven and the Sea, all great albums with some great songs on them. And Steve Diggle formed Flag of Convenience.
So they must have got back together because I've certainly seen they toured in 1989 in the USA. And actually, one of the gigs, they were supported by a band who became massive in American rock history, the Smashing Pumpkins.
Ah, right. Yeah, they did. So you're right. Coming back together in 89, they then released some new material in 91, released an EP. And then in 92, they released an album called Trade Test Transmissions, which once again, great album. Also in 92, the bassist Tony Barber and the drummer Phil Barker both joined the Buzzcocks, and they toured with Nirvana on one of their last tours. So I
saw that. Yeah, they played in gigs in France and Spain together. So that's very interesting.
Now, between 96 and 99, they released a live album called French, which was, strangely enough, recorded in Paris. And they released All Set in 96, and they released the album Modern in 99. The album Modern is interesting because Steve Diggle took over more of the vocal duties on that particular album.
So I saw them in 2000, actually. Northampton used to have a town show, a bit like a country fair. Every year, at the end, they'd have a band on. And they've had bands as big as Big Country, Heaven 17. But this year that I saw them, it was the Buzzcocks. Now, they came on and they said, look, we've been told repeatedly by the organisers, do not play Orgasm Addict. As a family audience, do not play it. So Pete Shelley says, so this first song is called Orgasm Addict. He starts playing it. It's really good.
So then, if we start looking at the next few years, 2007 through to 2014, they released an album called Flat Pack Philosophy, which has got a great song on it called Reconciliation.
Been contemplating lately what you mean to me. You are the one I care about, the only one I love. And though we may be separated by the sea, it's still just you I'm dreaming of. You must believe me. I'm gonna tell you something you already know. How to set for me forever, and I intend to keep the promise, you know.
then released The Way, and they used Pledge Music to raise funds for that album.
I saw them again actually in 2015. There's a great festival. I'd really recommend it. It's called Bearded Theory. It's one of the first festivals on the UK calendar. It's in May, so the weather could be dodged sometimes, but great little festival. And they were there supporting James, so it was a great festival.
Okay, brilliant. We then get to a point where in 2016 they were on their 40th anniversary. I said this would be a canter through the history.
It is.
In 2016, they embarked on their 40th anniversary tour, and the song "Why Can't I Touch It," which was actually a B-side, was featured in the film Guardians of the Galaxy. In 2018, there was a really sad event, the tragic passing of Pete Shelley, which definitely came as a shock to most fans.
Yeah, really.
Now, they'd already agreed to do a concert at the Royal Albert Hall that was set up, supported by the Skids and Penetration. And that gig turned out to be a beautiful tribute to Pete. So that was really, really lovely.
So other people joined the concert as a tribute as well, actually. So there were members of the Damned, the Only Ones, and Tim Burgess from the Charlatans was also there.
So I think quite a few people thought that might be the end of the band, but the story does indeed continue, which is fantastic news. So Steve Diggle said that he was intending to continue alongside the band's sort of current members, Danny Farrant and Chris Remington, and also there was the sort of touring guitarist Manny Perazzoli, and they released an album in 2022 called Sonics in the Soul, and once again had some great tracks on it.
And in 2022 as well, they supported From the Jam on the Beat Surrender 40th anniversary tour.
So as with all of our podcasts, we always like to take a focus on John Peel and his impact on the band. Well, the Buzzcocks were no strangers to that show. They had 5 John Peel sessions, which, if you look at them from 77 through to 2003, it's a lovely history of all of their a lot of their songs. Okay, well look, as I say, that is a bit of a canter through their history. Why don't we now find out a little bit more detail from the man himself. Steve Diggle, welcome to the podcast.
Nice to be here. Love being here.
Brilliant, thank you. So maybe just start for us a little bit about when you were growing up. What were your influences? What were the things that you were listening to?
Well, my cousin had, he lived a few doors down here. He had Elvis and Little Richard and Chuck Berry. So he could hear that blaring through his bedroom window. He lived a couple of doors down from me. And that was in the early 60s. And then by 1962, I heard this band, The Beatles. So that kind of changed everything, really, you know. I got a transistor radio for my birthday when I was young, probably about 7 or something. It was like the new thing to get a transistor radio. So you'd listen to Radio Luxembourg, and there was only children's favourites on what became Radio 1, I think, back in those days. So I'd heard a bit of Elvis, heard a bit of Chuck Berry on there, but it was a lot of comedy records like Charlie Drake and all that. All the George Martin produced ones. Which, incidentally, when I listened to Sgt. Pepper years later, you kind of hear really all them comedy records are all put on Sgt. Pepper, you know.
Yeah.
If you listen to it one way, you think, you know, apart from John Lennon or Paul McCartney singing, could be Charlie Drake in there. If you look at it from a weird way when you've had a few drinks. But going back to the beginning, yes. So I I was kind of like a child of the 60s, really, you know. Like I said, my cousin had the 50s stuff. And then the Beatles came out, and that kind of changed everything. And then there was like the Rolling Stones, Ready, Steady, Go had just come on the TV. I remember Mick Jagger's big face filling the screen going, I'm the little red rooster, you know. It's like, wow, that was a moment, you know. And then, of course, you had the Kinks and then the Who, you know. So in 1965, I'd be 10 years old, and you know, the Stones had brought Satisfaction out. I think the Beatles had brought Help out by that time, and stuff like that. And the Who had My Generation. So I was getting hit every sort of week with all these great singles coming out. You know, it was amazing time. So you couldn't escape that, and you wouldn't want to anyway. But that crystallized a lot of things I had, really. You know. And the other thing was around that time was when I was 70, 62, I had the first Beatles Twist and Shout EP, but couldn't afford the album. That was a lot of money then, you know. So my mate across the road, his sister was 16 and she had the first Beatles album and the first Bob Dylan album. So I'm watching her dry hair with this long blonde, she had long blonde hair and she had this hair dryer. And I'm watching her try that and I'm listening to the Beatles and you sort of get the Beatles for you know, the harmonies and the tunes. And then there was this other bloke, Bob Dylan. I thought, I don't know what he's saying, but, you know, it resonates somewhere, you know. How many roads does a man walk down? All that kind of stuff. And so that was a moment, watching her dry long blonde hair with a hairdryer, which I'd never seen before. It was like something from outer space. And listening to the first Beatles album and the first Bob Dylan album. And looking back, you know, I didn't realise that crystallised my musical life in a moment because I didn't think I'd be in a band or anything. I didn't, you know, as a music fan. And but looking back, that was a moment that changed my life completely, really, you know. I was like 7 years old, you know.
Amazing. That's like some classic musical influences there.
Yeah.
Really, really, really good.
And then there was a lot of Motown, you know, in 65 and stuff like that. So I'd listened to all the Motown stuff as well and all soul stuff that was coming out, you know. So there was all that there as well. Yeah.
I was going to ask you about, you talked about like you're down the road and everything else. I read somewhere that you live right close to the Moors murderers, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. Did you ever have any interaction with them or see them or anything?
Yes, I did, yeah. Myra Hindley lived down the road. I didn't know at the time who, you know, I mean, nobody knew her then. But there was one bonfire night. We collected all the bonfire wood and put it at the end of the street, as you kind of did every year, ready for the bonfire.
Yeah.
And this teddy boy turned up, and this blonde woman. At first, I thought it was down the doors, but it was Myra Hindley. And they were saying that, he was saying that, come and sit next to Myra and stuff like that. We're all kind of looking there. And I was sort of becoming sexually aware then. I almost went there, but my cousins and other people were there, you know. It's a weird moment. But yeah, I mean, that was a lucky escape, really, you know.
Yeah, God.
I can still see that image in my mind now, you know. Come and sit next to Myra, you know. Like a couple of years later, of course, it was on the news everywhere, you know. I mean,
yeah,
as we know. And but it's like that was that sort of teddy boy and that blonde woman that, you know, was hanging around the streets, you know, when we were there. So that was a lucky escape, really. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's shocking even now. I mean, I drove over Saddleworth Moor not a long time ago, and even that puts a spine, you know, tingle down your spine, the thought of it. So yeah, no, that's amazing.
It
that
still
is.
does, doesn't it? Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
When I pass there many times,
Absolutely.
that's the first thing you think of, isn't it? It's like,
yeah,
it's a dark moment, which I think somehow that sort of puts you in touch with the dark side of life. That sort of meeting for a moment, that you realise that life wasn't all sweet, you know. Probably a bit of a weird education as well, learning.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to leap forward to the Buzzcocks. So obviously the story about you meeting Pete and Howard at the first Sex Pistols gig at the Free Trade Hall in Manchester is fairly well documented. But did you always think you were going to go into a career in music?
No, I mean, I lost my scooter license, and so I was getting up for 17. I had scooters when I was 16 because. Going back to the streets, a guy in the street had a scooter when I was young, Union Jack, side panels, all the mod stuff. I thought I want one of them one day. Anyway, by the time I got to 15 or 16, I had the scooters, but then I did something a bit bad and I lost my license. And I stole a scooter, to get parts for mine. There's a lot of kids doing that in the streets here. I ended up a weekend in jail, and I thought, I've got to change my life. You commit one crime, and you're supposed to learn a lesson from that. It's not a good thing to do at all, especially with other scooter people. But so I was grounded then to like the pub. I was 17. I was grounded to the pub, and this little Spanish guitar I had. So I started playing that a little bit. But the interesting thing about that was it was like a £6 guitar, and every time you tuned up, it went out of tune. So I got bored of tuning it because you strike a chord and it go out of tune. So I started playing, on a couple of strings, making little tunes. And one of the first things I learned was Beethoven's Ninth, which you can play on one string and a little. So I thought I could play Beethoven before the Beatles. But those little riffs came, or having that approach to it then was a good thing, because there's a lot of little guitar motifs on Buzzcocks records that really came from having to play like that with this old Spanish guitar. In the face of adversity, I was using the limitations of that. I didn't realise that at the time. But if I'd have had a good guitar, I wouldn't have played like that. I wouldn't have been playing on a couple of strings and making these little tunes. So just shows you, when your back's against the wall, or it's always possible. Because the posh kids had new guitars, you see, expensive ones, their daddies.
Yeah.
So if I'd have had one of them, I don't think there would have been a lot of Buzzcocks identity missing in terms of the riffs, Incidentally, a lot of them sold their guitars. You'd see them in the guitar shops. How'd you go on with that Les Paul, which was like, really expensive and everything. And I sold it for a pair of skis.
Oh, God.
Jesus. So that's, you knew they weren't getting into it. So for 3 years then, I was writing songs at home, Suddenly I found myself on the dole because I had one job and of course a strike there. So I found myself unemployed, but happily unemployed, because I thought, I'm 17, I'm using the free time to do these things and find yourself and all that kind of stuff, I was reading tons of books. I thought, when they come for me in Oxford and Cambridge, I'll have them. You'd find like books on philosophy in the local Oxfam and stuff for like 20 pence. And he said it's kind of the Greek philosophy started in Asia Minor, which I've been to since. And incidentally, I've got a Greek girlfriend now as well. So I thought I'd never get to places like that. But anyway, the world of books holds you up to literature a lot more. And I was reading lots and trying to write these songs, So one day I wrote this song called Fast Cars. It was a lot slower than we do it as the Buzzcocks. But sent a cassette to the local radio station, never heard anything, So you're there in the wilderness, tried to play with a couple of guitar guys round the corner, let's get this band together. I think we did Black Sabbath's Paranoid, and one of the guys had a tune like Keith Richards, so we did Brown Sugar as well. And we did this song Fast Cars and stuff, And so I thought I'll phone somebody out, I saw ads in the paper, so I phoned somebody out the paper to meet them outside the Free Trade Hall in Manchester, and that's where Malcolm McLaren was stood outside, and he said they're in here, and I thought, I don't know anything about this, and he introduced me to Pete, who was collecting tickets, and Howard that was doing the lights, So that's all that came about. I'd never been in a band before, But
Wow.
I've seen people playing social clubs and stuff. I thought they're really good players, but they've no consciousness. They're like farm animals. They're just doing covers all the time, you know. I mean, it sounds a bit harsh, but I thought, I don't want to be doing that, you know. And luckily, I thought we want to write our own songs, smash the guitars and all that sort of stuff. So that was my thinking of it. And then I met Howard and Pete, and then we formed, you know, the Buzzcocks. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So post Spiral Scratch, then was it a conscious decision about the? I mean, I feel there was a bit of a change in sound of the Buzzcocks. I mean, whether or not that's like the classic Buzzcock sound post Spiral Scratch, I don't know. Was that a conscious decision to change that?
Well, Howard said, we'd done Spiral Scratch, and he said, I'm leaving. Me and Pete were sat on his sofa in his bedsit at the time, and we just looked at each other and said, we'll carry on. Of course, we were shocked for a minute. It was like, you know, we'd just done Spiral Scratch. This jerky thing with boredom and all that kind of stuff on it. That kind of put us on the map and everything. And he's like, now you're leaving, you know. So we said, we'll carry on. So the good thing about that was I played bass on Spiral Scratch. But I said, I'll move over to guitar. You could do a lot of the singing, and we'll get a bass player in, and we'll do it like that. And that's what kind of became as the classic lineup, really, you know. So I had this song called I Might Need You. I had 2 tape recorders, and I flooded them, sort of double trapped myself on 2 cassettes. I went around Pete's house one day, and I said, look, I've just done this on a cassette. And it sort of went, I might need you. Do what you want, don't make me blue. I said, they're only working words, these, but I might need. I said, it's all about the eye. A couple of days later, he said, actually, I played it to Howard as well, but you kind of knew it wasn't for him. You know, Pete said, play that song to Howard. And he didn't seem that, you know, it was a different thing, and I think he was about to leave. Anyway, a few days later, Pete had this song, What Do I Get? And I said, that sounds very similar to mine, but he put these other bits. You only get sleepless night. And I think that was the catalyst, really, for that kind of different sound, that bit more melodic rather than the jerkier kind of stuff, you know. So you kind of had like a What Do I Get? A bit later on, I wrote the song Promises. I mean, Pete sings it. He wrote the verses because I said, you know, change the verses. But you can see with those kind of songs, we was in the area of the more melodic approach, more singles kind of approach, really, you know, the pop element or something, you know.
On my side, we played the game strictly to our rules. We let the field a love affair, which made all other lovers fools. Oh, how can you ever let me down? How can you ever let me down? How can you ever let me down? These promises are made for us. We promised that we'd always have time for each other whenever I needed you there. We promised to be true, there'd be no other. We promised that forever we would care. Oh, how can you ever let me down? How can you ever let me down? How can you ever let me down? These promises are made for us.
So it sort of all developed from there, but we never actually consciously sat down to sort of do that. Let's change the sound. It just kind of evolved because me and Pete were on the guitars and that kind of stuff. And it just evolved from there, really, you know. It always becomes a moment where things start happening and start happening right, you know. If we'd have sat down and sort of planned those things, you know, it would have been a lot more difficult, you know. So it just naturally took its course. And I always think that is, you know, you used to read about learning guitar in books and chords and that, but it comes from inside who you are, I think, really, more than what you're playing, you know, that interpretation coming through the guitar or through the song you've done. And that's what happened with Pete and myself. I think it was like it came, you know what I mean, it just came naturally like that. And before you know it, I mean, we kind of signed a record deal. It's like, look, well, you know, need an album. So we'd go into this rehearsal place, we'd have our songs, Pete'd have his out of mine, and then we'd just churn them out and say, we've got to be in the pub at 5 o'clock. We can't be here all afternoon. That was kind of like the motivation, you know. So sometimes not being a bit precious about these things as well, which an important element looking back. I mean, we were young, we were 20, so it was just like, you kind of felt like you knew what you was doing. And you just have that confidence and self-belief somehow that takes you through. But also at the same time, we had, I thought we're doing an album. I had this song called Autonomy, which I was listening to this German band, Can. We all went to see Can just before they split up and just before I met Pete and Howard, actually, just after I'd met them. And we was into Can, Noi and stuff like that, as well as all the regular sort of 60s stuff and things. And I thought, it's kind of weird listening to Can, listen to a German guy trying to sing English, So I was 20 years old. I thought, I'll pretend to be an English guy trying to be a German singing English. That's how I got on that song. And must have been very arty then or something. So I'm kind of going like, I want you autonomy, So, and I thought, I can't really sing it like that. But it got there like that. And also, as I was doing that, I just went straight down the neck of the guitar. I just thought I'll approach it completely unorthodox. I went just like that, the most ridiculous thing. But I thought, oh, that sounds good. And then I had this other ascending riff, to make it more experimental than the poppier ones we'd done. So that was a game changer on the first album, Autonomy with that. I think Johnny Marr's documented somewhere in a video saying when he heard the riff of Autonomy, he thought that was the new sound of Manchester, That was the clarion call of like, this is the new way forward. Because, the Pistols and the Clash all had kind of linear songs at the time where that wasn't. On that first album, we had Fiction Romance, which is another kind of like chuggy. Pete showed me the chug, and I said, I won't learn the chords. I'll just play one note. That's how it goes. So he went, and I went, I said to him, without that note in the song, there's no song. It's only the one note. But, I don't need to do anything else. So there was them moving away from the pulse beat on that first album, which was quite of I think with that one, it was kind of a loose thing. I think Pete had some sort of chords, sort of a bit Bo Diddley area or that kind of way in the drum stuff. and I couldn't hear them, so I did all these weird riffs, all the little tune on it. I said, I can't hear what you're doing over there. I can't be bothered learning the chords, all this. So those haphazard things kind of worked as well. We could read each other, the chemistry of the band, you know. So there was all them ingredients. Because some people sort of say, oh, you're a singles band. It's like, well, no, when you listen to this other stuff, covers a lot more ground, you know.
And what was the impact of those first reviews, you know, like the Sounds review and the Enemy review? You know, I think the Enemy did the Band on the Wall gig. What were those reviews like in terms of the impact that it had on you as a band?
I think at this point we thought the songs were good, or we had an identity there, and the album was reviewed. I think it was a bit of a surprise for people because you had this explosion of punk. You had the Sex Pistols with Nevermind the Bollocks, the Clash with their first album, you know, and that was all linear, and we had all this other stuff as well as like catchy songs like I Don't Mind on there, and Fast Cars, which is, you know, those sort of songs. But we had this other stuff, you know. I think Mick Jones from the Clash, he came to see us at the Hammersmith Odeon at the time, about 78, and he said so only the Buzzcocks could end with a song like that, because that was all a bit groundbreaking at the time, even though it might not seem as much now. That was like, well, you know, you take this punk thing or whatever, it's somewhere else, you know. And that's what we were trying to do, as well as a lot of the hit singles we had, you know. We knew we could do that side of it, but it's the other side, which I think influenced a lot of people, really, you know, at that time. It's like, oh, there's all the possibilities with it, you know.
Okay,
So talking about Mick, sorry to interrupt. Talking about Mick Jones, obviously you went on the White Riot tour with the Clash. So were you mates with the Clash, or was there any rivalry there with them? Was it like a, you know, kind of a
no, we were
validate each other?
really good mates. I think that song was talking about autonomy. When the album came out, Joe Summer loved that. He came up to me and he went, "Here, you wrote that song, Autonomy." I thought, well, he'd like it because of the title, Self-Rule, but he loved that one. I'm not sure on the White Riot tour whether they did, the sound check did that, you know. They did one of our songs, I'm sure it was that. We hadn't arrived by that, you know. But they said they'd just done the Buzzcocks song. But we were so good mates, you know, because we did the thing at this, you know, we brought the Sex Pistols to Manchester early on, in the early days, and so we got to know the Sex Pistols. Then we went to the Screen on the Green in Islington, and for £1, I think it was the Sex Pistols, Clash, and Buzzcocks all on one bill, you know.
Amazing.
That's a bargain.
That's good, isn't it? and so got to know the Clash there, really. And then next minute we was on the White Riot show, so we got to know them really well, you know. And even after that tour, you know, I had to meet them, go and see them at the gigs, and take them out on the town, you know, if there's hanging around. I took Joe Stummer to this pub, and he loved it. It was called Tommy Ducks in Manchester. He had all knickers nailed on the wall, stapled on the wall, all stained from cigarettes, a coffin in there and all that. But in fact, he went there when he came down with the Pistols, when the Pistols did that early gig there. And we all went there, the Sex Pistols and Joe. And he said, where was that pub we all went that time? So I used to take there, and I used to hang around with Mick as well around that time, you know, go and see them and stuff. And so we was all kind of mates, really, you know. It was all that school of 76, really. Same with the Jam, you know, we got to see them early on. I think they played a couple of gigs on the White Riot tour, and then they dropped out early on. But we'd see that we'd done a television show for Tony Wilson. They was filming us and the Jam live, you know. So we got to know them there. And the Damned a little bit later, really. But that was the nucleus in 76 of all those bands. So if we see each other, we all know that we started around that time, you know what I mean? So we was all mates, we weren't rivals. I was a massive Clash fan, you know, and I loved what they were all doing, you know what I mean? The Jam and the Pistols album, you know. So we all loved what each other was doing. And I know they loved the Buzzcocks as well, you know. So there was like mutual admiration. And also, we were in the punk rock wars at the time in 76, 77, you know. That White Riot tour was crazy, you know.
We sort of get the impression like the Screen on the Green and the 100 Club punk festival thing there was quite chaotic. I mean, was it really, or was it actually quite orderly?
There was a lot of excitement, you know. People had sort of come alive, really. You know, like this new thing called punk, and there was a lot of a lot of excitement. I was just think it's like the rebirth of rock and roll or something, you know. And sometimes you think, like, say if I was watching a classic or something, is this just for the moment, or is this like history, you know? It's a double take thinking, this is amazing. But maybe it'll only last a few weeks or whatever, who knows? Nobody really cared at that time anyway. It was kind of like, this is amazing. So there's Screen on the Green, the 100 Club was exciting. That was a 3-day event. So there's a lot of excitement there, people going there every day. I think the Pistols were on one day. We was on another day with the Damned, I think. And then I think there was another day. So all those bands were playing on different days. But there's a lot of excitement about that 3-day event. And then the Screen on the Green, everybody was dressed up there, you know, in these punk clothes, and that's the first time I'd really seen it all like that. You know, I thought this has sort of crystallised the scene or something. Something's definitely happening now. You know, it's certainly on. Because in Manchester, nobody was dressed like that at the time. You know, and nobody could afford them Vivienne Westwood clothes for it. You know what I mean? It's like with a pair of bondage pants, you could probably buy a house in Manchester at the time.
Brilliant.
But also, we knew that wasn't our style. Where you know, you knew it's like you're not just going to go in the shop, buy that, and come out and go on with punk. You know, we'd get stuff from Oxford. My brother would buy a pink shirt, rip the sleeve off, and then spray a lot of stuff on it for me. You know, that cost probably 30 pence or something like that. But yeah, there was that excitement there because it was all new. You know.
Because Richard Boone seemed to be quite an influence on the band. I mean, I don't know if he was like a mentor or a manager or, you know, but how important was he to the success of the band?
He became the manager. He started answering the phone because he was a mate of Howard Devoto from college, and you know Howard had left, but the phone was ringing, and they'd say like, you know, I mean, he'd go, the band are not here or whatever, and somehow that's how he got the job of like the manager. Really, it's like, well, he's answering the phone. I think he was a bit of a fan, really. You know, I mean, he didn't steer us in any way. You know, I mean, we was just getting on doing what we're doing, and we knew what we wanted to do. But I think he was a fan, and he got excited about, you know, he got excited about the artwork and the whole thing, really. Don't know how much of an influence. I mean, he did have some input, but it wasn't really like he said, why don't you do this or that? You know, it was just like, he's the manager, you know. But, you know, by this time, we're going up and down the country playing. We're writing the songs and getting in the studio. So, you know, I mean, we was our own people, really. But Richard was a great fan and inspirational, you know, in a way that you just thought he's like a fan rather than a manager kind of guy, you know, cigar smoking manager going, I could make $1 million out of this. He was excited about it all, you know. Eventually, we got an office, I think, after the first year. So a lot of people used to come and visit there. So quite often you see Richard in the pub round the corner on his break or taking time, talking to people, fans or people that had written books or whatever, that wanted to know about this Buzzcocks scene happening around Manchester and the office, you know. And you've got like Linda, who designed the Orgasmatic cover and stuff like that. And I think Morrissey probably came in the office and that because he started befriending Linda, and so our office was like a little scene. So much so that when we used to go and have a group meeting, we'd go in a pub round the corner because the office was too busy, full of people. So our office became the Wagon and Horses, just round the corner from 50 Newton Street.
Brilliant.
Which when a lot of work was done, me and Pete would be there. You know, we'd all meet there. I think the others would have 2 drinks. We'd probably about 10, me and Pete. But it's the same looking back, you know, because we'd discuss life and all these things and everything, get drunk and have little banter, little arguments, a little bit of fun, all kinds of things. Well, they're like them French philosophers used to sit outside bistros, you know, Picasso's and Albert Camus and existentialists. So we sat outside the Coach and Horses. This is our one, you know. This is our moment. But a lot of off the ball work was done in those in that pub and other places, you know. Me and Pete talking when we've had a drink, because he likes to drink as well. And I said, sometimes when you look at it, because we kind of sang about the human condition, I said, it's almost like when we're talking, you know, in the pub, we've set that to music. That's what's coming out of the speakers. Because some of the ideas and things must have been absorbed and come through in the lyrics and stuff like that, you know. So that's another weird way of looking at it. It's like, just imagine us two talking in the pub, but it's a Buzzcocks record. That's a weird way of looking at it, but it just there was a lot of groundwork on there. We weren't there just getting aimlessly drunk. Somehow we used it, but that was our excuse. But it was very important, that.
Because has your songwriting changed over the years? Because obviously you wrote a lot with Pete in the early days, but has it changed much at all?
In the first incarnation of it, it was very that classic Buzzcocks sound and stuff. And if I had a song and I left the words at home, he'd have some words or something. I'd say, you sing this one, even my song. Or I'd sing me on. Then we started singing our own songs more. I had songs like Why She's a Girl from a Chain Store, which was a little bit political, really, And he said about Bernstein's language barrier, where the language at home is different from the language in the school. So he had underachievers spellbound by big words and stuff. And I thought, if I could put that in a song and stuff like that, So there was a lot of little political elements to me, more social politics and finger point stuff, which kind of sang our own a lot more later on, But then we split up, and then when we got back, the sound changed, there was no mobile phones when we was writing these songs, or computers even. So, and all that classic stuff at the beginning. So the sound changed naturally because our environments and what had happened when we kind of got back, And I was always one for trying to push it. Even back in those days, like I say, with autonomy and stuff like that, came up with the chords for Why Can't I Touch It and the groove, I thought we haven't got a groove song. And I was listening to Rolling Stones' Fingerprint File at the time. I had the album, I hadn't heard it for a long time. And there's a track called, Fingerprint File at the end. But it's just a funky, groovy sort of track. I thought, I like that. I used to like that track. And I thought we need something like that, a sort of a bit of a groove, And nothing to do with that song, really. But by the time I got to rehearsal place, I played this kind of chord, and they joined in, and Steve Diggle put a great bass line to it. And Pete was late, but that was a good job because we had this groove going, and he came in and then started singing Why Can't I Touch It, So when they're made like that, it's different from when you write your own one at home, It sort of like evolves from bits and pieces of the band as well, which is a good way of doing it also to get the best out of the band. So those were always game changers, On the later albums, we did like an electronic kind of album, or brought some electronics in, called Modern in the 90s, And that sounded very different. It's like, let's use a bit of that, bit of electronics on this album. But we have one called Trade Test Transmission. Somebody's asking about that the other day, and that's it sounds like Buzzcocks, but Buzzcocks in the 90s,
Take me to the party at
it's kind of different people then, you know. I mean, it just evolves, and you're evolving as a person in the world, and that's the input that's coming into you all the time as you're going on. So the music's inevitably got to change, and also you didn't want to go, let's make the first album again and again, you know. Otherwise, you have to call yourself the Ramones, which I do love. But when you get the fourth one, you've got the idea.
Yeah.
But they loved us, the Ramones. They came to see us in New York on our first visit and said, we love you guys. Mainly for that reason. They go, we just straight ahead. You guys go off on these little tangents, kind of discordant things. And they loved that, the Ramones. And we said, we love you guys. So, but it evolves like that, you know. Up until now, you know, we did that album Sonics in the Soul 2 years ago without my brother Pete now because, and that was a bit weird. But it wasn't weird to do it because, you know, we'd go in on the last number of albums and we kind of record separately and then get on it to us once, you know. Because he used to, like For the Way, I think that was the last album before Sonics in the Soul. Well, it took all the time to get him to write some songs. So I said, just write 5 and I'll write 5, make life easy. And we both had 10. So he took the guys in the studio and did his 10 songs, and then I took him in and did 10. So, he's used to working together, separately as well by this point. But for Sonics in the Soul, I wanted to take it somewhere else, you know. Keep all them elements and threads of what you know as Buzzcocks, but try and move it on and take it in a different area, you know. I tried to imagine Pete was with me at first, you know. I thought, classic Buzzcocks album was Pete's songs and my songs and all that and alternating. Now it's just me, so for a couple of them, I thought, I need a kind of Pete one, that was sort of there a little bit. And after there's about 4 songs in, I thought, I had a moment of remembering when we started, like we were talking earlier. The first verse in Howard Devoto's Bedsit, and I thought it was boredom and orgasmatic, all that stuff, and showing them this song, Fast Cars and all that stuff. And I thought, I'll never have that moment again. It's me making this album. But that lineup, it will never do that again. That was a magic moment in your life, you know. It was a bit of a meltdown moment because I was a bit emotional about Pete dying and all that, you know. I was like, fuck, that'll never happen again, you know. So I did this song, Censored Out of Control, thinking I'll do one with the memory of them Spiral Scratch days. So that's got a little bit of that early Spiral Scratchy thing to it. And in the background, I'm kind of doing a bit of Pete. I'm going, Senses out of control. Oh, no, you know, putting a bit of that in. You know, I thought, I'll bring you along with me, brother, the best I can. But then I wrote that album. I thought, I had about four songs, and I thought, now we need one of these. Now I need one of those. So I wrote it to sequence that album. Normally, you'd get a bunch of songs, and then you put them together, sequence them at the end to make an album. But I did that like a journey, you know. I thought, right, you know, you've got 3 fast ones. Now here's the bad news. We've got to go down for a bit and then, you know, we need one with a groove. So I think on that one we get to like a song called Bad Dreams, which has got the classic Buzzcocks chug, you know. So we need one with a chugging and all that kind of thing. And then there's that sort of groovy one on that, and then it lifts up to faster ones. So, but I wrote it like that. I thought it's like when you read a book, you know, you start at the beginning, you've got to get to the end before you know what the story is and that. And I thought, I'll make it like one of them 70s albums where it was a whole journey, you know. And that's what I did with that album. And I think that's why that album works, really. It's like you put it on, you've had a whole experience. Like you used to do with the, you know, in the old record days, 70s days and stuff. It was that full experience, not just that a bunch of songs stuck together, you know. Like a roller coaster ride, you know, and so that was important, and I learned something doing it that way myself by writing. Now I'm going to write one like that, so I onto that, which we'd never done before, you know, even in the old days and stuff. So that was a change of style of writing, you know, but it turned out it worked out well, that, you know.
So just to talk about Pete for a second, so. Still shocking to even now, so young. But where were you when you heard about him passing?
Well, I was in my house. I was just about to leave for a big party in Mayfair, and the manager phoned, and he said, "I've got some." Well, it was ringing. I thought the old manager Raf. It was. I thought, well, when he's on the phone, he's on for like 20 minutes, half an hour, a long time. And I kept looking at the phone ringing and thinking, should I answer it? Because I was late for this party. I thought I'd better answer and tell him I've got to go soon. And then he said, I've got something to tell you. Pete's died. Well, that floored me, you know. I mean, it was coming up to Christmas. We'd finished the last gig 2 weeks earlier. And I said, I'll see you after Christmas. So it wasn't long since So I was just in a state of shock, really, you know. Walked around in the house for an hour. And I thought, what am I going to do? And I went to a local pub just up the road from me. And I thought, I better get a drink and sit outside. And as I went in there was an actor I used to drink with in Highgate round here called Bob Blythe, this Welsh guy. And it was his wake, his drink. They just buried him that day, you know.
Oh, wow.
I thought, this pub's full. I'm just going to get a drink again. Then I realised when I'm sat outside, that's the funeral party for this guy, Bob. So it was a double blow in a way, you know. So I had a few drinks in there and I went up to my local pub. Because I didn't want people going through it with people really right at that moment, you know. It was still raw, it was still like a couple of hours. But I just did that really, you know. And that was 6 years ago or more now. It's hard to believe. I still think it's about 18 months ago, but the time scale's something else, you know. It was 63, that's not old.
Tell me about it. Shocking. Tell us all about it. Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, so onwards and upwards with that, you know. I did say that just before COVID, we had 11 gigs booked, including we had the Albert Hall, and we made that a memorial for Pete to do, and we had guests on there. And then I said, I don't want to go out and just do like a great hits band or something, you know. So we made this EP, a single called Got to Get Better, and the B-side was called Destination Zero, which I liked the B-side better. And the manager thought, it was on after it was printed. I said, yeah, it should have been the other way around. He said, oh, I thought it was that way. But now that, so we went out with a new single for 11 shows, which kind of put us on the journey we're on now. And, you know, the band became different. But that was good. Then it was lockdown. Then I wrote the Sonics in the Soul album during lockdown. So, I mean, taking us on a new journey with this, where we play a lot of the classic stuff, but a lot of new stuff, you know. We kind of got like a 3-tier set, really. You've got a lot of the hits that people want to hear, that like to hear. You've got the new album, so we play 3 or 4 songs off that. And then there's certain album tracks that your regular fans say, oh, you've not played that one off, you know, track 9 off that album. And so putting all that in within an hour and a half is quite difficult, really, because it could go on for a lot longer, really, sometimes. So, but that's the way it is now. That's the setup now. But that Destination Zero song, that was a B-side, the first single, and it's coming to its own now. It's a great crowd pleaser live, you know. And it's weird how the songs start taking on a new life. And it's the same with Why Can't I Touch It. We used to do that in the set. It was always good to do, you know, back in, you know, the days. And but now I don't sing the chorus, all the crowd sing it, you know. I sing the verse and I'm going, so, and they all go, what? It sounds like, well, you sing it, you know. Which they never used to do years ago. It was, you know, a groovy song. But that's taken on a different life as well. So it's amazing how it all still evolves, you know. I don't think I've sung the chorus for about 20 shows at least. I just let the audience do it, which is a great thing. It's a great sort of communal thing now. Just shows you that, you know, that how they evolve and have a new place in the set or in life and the gigs, you know. So that's kind of good now. That's sort of where we're at now with it all, you know.
Can I take you back to 2012 when you sort of got the original lineup back together, and you did some gigs with Howard? What was the driver for it?
Well, it was like, I think it was the 30th anniversary, which seems so young now. That we must be on our 50th or something. And that doesn't seem that long ago. But yeah, so it was that. It was like, why don't we, you know, it's record companies and people love all this anniversary stuff. So, like, when you do it's like a thing, it's 30 years since you've been going, all that stuff. We'd been on tour in America and all kinds of places, all around the world all year. And then we came back and we only did 2 shows. We did one at Brixton Academy, one at Manchester Apollo, with 3 different lineups. So we opened up the set with the lineup we've got now. Then we did the classic set with John Maher and Steve Diggle that played on a lot of the classical, all the early album stuff, or the main stuff. Then we brought Howard on at the end, you know. So it was like a 3-tier thing. The only thing was me and Pete Shelley were on for the whole thing. It was, it's a lot of work, a lot of songs, but it was good. But it's like they can go off. We're still back. We're back on again because you know. So we tried to cover it. You know, the 3 different lineups really. We did like sets from the 3 different lineups. In fact, I think Howard came on for 2 songs only because he wasn't. But the other lineups we did, yeah. But I wasn't so sure about that really. I mean, it was nice, you know, but we was a well-oiled machine. We just got back from America and that. And then when you have to bring other people playing, you think just guesting up for one night and then not even rehearse with them properly. It's got a different feel and stuff, you know. I mean, it works, but I thought the first lineup, we're on fire. We've been doing this all year, you know. So trying to put people in, and even the Howard one was a little bit, you know, it was all right. But I mean, I went along with it. I didn't want to do it really, but it was more for Pete. He likes anniversaries and stuff, yeah. So that, you know, that was okay. It was like nostalgic for those 2 big shows, really. But you know, you wouldn't want to do that every show because that was perhaps more of a celebration and covering a lot of the ground that we'd laid down over the years, you know. So it's all right, but it's like, oh no, we can get back to what we're seriously doing. That's what I felt a little bit, you know.
So of course you've got the Pistols now going out, haven't you? Back it with Frank Carter. So do you look at that and think, why are you doing that?
Well, a lot of people, the jury's out on that. There's a lot of people thinking both ways on that. But when you hear Steve Jones' guitar, it's just like, even if you just went for that, you know, that guitar he was playing, and that's what I heard in '76 when I saw the Sex Pistols. Nobody plays it like he does. So even if you're going for that, you know. I mean, if they want to get back and do it, and a lot of people never saw the Pistols, you know, even when they were going, they was playing little clubs sometimes, you know, they'd just turn up somewhere. Like they'd done that one at the 100 Club as the Spots, you know, they did it in Wolverhampton and a couple of other places years ago. So, you know, it's a different thing. I mean, in my case, that's why I've wanted to do new albums since we've been doing it. The key word's relevance, you know. And I've just recorded a new album as well. I'm going back in the mix. I recorded it before we started these Irish dates last week. I'm going back in the mix and put a couple of overdubs on. So I'm excited about that as well, you know. So, you know, we've had one new album out and a single, and then this will be the second album. So I think that gives it relevance, and you're still on the journey with something, you know. Because I said to the manager at the time, I just don't want to go and just do this greatest hits forever, you know, which you could easily do. So I think that's the difference there for me with it, you know. But we're doing Margate with the Sex Pistols, so that'll be a laugh, you know,
Wow.
be good. I suppose the other side of it, like I said, a lot of people haven't seen the Pistols, even though it's not with Johnny. You know, they get to see 3 of them and they get to see that, you know. I don't know what the moral thing is and all that with it. It's like, you know, don't go if you don't want to go, you know what I mean? If you want to go. But I think it'll be a great day, you know. And they'll see us there, you know, as well, you know. you do get the doubters, the haters, the dubious ones, but over the last 6 years, you know, you see, you've had one or two of those, and when they come to the gig, they're just blown away. So that's what you have to deal with, you know. It's like, that's what it is, you know. What is nice, like a lot of people, nothing but praise for the new album. So it's great to do Ever Fallen Harmony and all them songs, and going, it's the new stuff as well, and they're loving it, you know.
Songs like Manchester Rain
Yeah.
would fit into that set easily.
Yeah. Well, all of them do. The ones we play, they all fit in easily, nicely. So it's, I say, there's a thread of it there, but a little bit different. I mean, the thing with Manchester Rain, when we first played Manchester post Pete, it was raining, and I walked down from the hotel. I was just going in the stage door, and there was these young kids there. And, oh, Steve, can you sign this and that? We're going to start a band, you know, and all that. And I'm going, oh, really, you know. And I looked at them and I thought, that was me 40 years ago, you know. You know, and I've lived in London for 3 years, but I thought, back in my own town, look at this. And so the song's partly about that, you know. It's really singing about a metaphysical rain. That's what I tell people on the stage. It's not just the bloody rain in the sky. It's all right when your back's set against the wall, you know. How do you solve a problem deep inside? How do you solve a problem you can't explain? Standing on the corner, standing in Manchester Rain, you know. So those kids were kind of, I thought, you know, I said, good luck to you and all that and everything. For, you know, hopefully they'll be starting a band. And I thought myself, you know, I'm stood in the rain on the corner as well, with them, because now it's a new band without Pete, or, you know, it's a new situation. So that song got a lot, you know, a lot of inspiration that way, you know, from people starting out to me being where I am with it and all that stuff, you know.
Solve a problem you can't explain. Standing on the corner, standing in the Manchester rain. How do you catch a dream you just can't find yet? How do you catch a star that calls your name? Standing on the corner, standing in the Manchester rain. Standing in the Manchester rain, yeah. Standing in the Manchester rain.
That's the other thing about young people coming. When you're at the front and they've checked out the old stuff and they're checking out the new stuff. When you see them singing Sense Out of Control on Manchester Rain at the front, young kids, you know. I mean, to them, that might be the same as any song we've done, you know what I mean, just in time scale. So that's very heartening as well. You know, I mean, it's like, fuck, they know the new stuff, you know, and that's been a good thing, you know.
And interesting when you say you know, in those last 40 or 50 years, is there one memory that you've got that you would say that's my favorite memory so far? Is there one thing?
Not really. I mean, there's millions of them, really. Coming off stage and Meg Ryan asking me for a cigarette as soon as I got off the stage at Madison Square Garden. I don't know if that's the best memory. I didn't know who she was. I'd never met Harry or Sally or whatever. But she was lovely. She was great. There was one moment. I mean, it's been some amazing moments, you know, playing 200,000 in America and, you know, in San Bernardino, that you think, wow. And America have always loved us, you know, they've always, you know, but so has Britain, and, yeah, but, you know, we've always. But there was one moment, was in Australia, was in Brisbane, and Pete came to my room and we was getting stoned on the balcony, just by this bridge by the water. So we're sat on the balcony and the water's flowing, a lovely summer evening, we've done the gig. He said, in his kind of accent, you'd have thought all those years ago would be here, Stephen, and we was having a, you know, having a joint by this bridge in the water. And that was a lovely moment, you know, because we never sat back and thought about, well, wasn't it great doing this and that? We never really, we was always kind of just thinking ahead or getting on with it. But that was a lovely moment, thinking back now. He said, who'd have thought all those years ago, I mean, when I met him, he didn't even have a plectrum. He stuck 2 stalk margarine packets together and cut a plectrum out. And then we were in Brisbane or somewhere doing an Australian tour. And so that was a great moment. But many moments, really, I mean, Bruce Springsteen said, hello, Steve. I was invited to Claridge's Hotel one time to see them. So we got to know little Stephen well, who was great. And Bruce came up and he said, I said, I'm playing the Buzzcocks. He said, I know you are, Steve. I've got your records at home. So that blew me away, you think.
Wow.
I might have to explain that. I started with the Clash and the Pistols, exactly, things like that, But mainly, it's all the crowds every night. We was always good live, that was the thing. Right from 76, we never had to ask anyone to stand on the chair or clap their hands, I mean, every crowd's been great. It's like, it's that understanding with it. But if you're a Buzzcocks fan or you want to see the nature of the songs and the speed, the energy, or whatever it is, the magic there. That's the thing every night, and it's special every night because it's mainly different people, a different room, and all that. So you play the songs differently every night because you're playing to different people, You're not playing that. Some people say, don't you get tired of playing the old ones? It's like, well, I'm not playing it the same as I did yesterday. So I'm reacting in a different way with the crowd, And that's an amazing thing, then, to have that communication, I think, is important, with the crowd and stuff. It's all good,
I've got one last question, which has been a couple of fan questions, really, if that's okay.
Yeah.
One is the album Homo Sapien by Pete when the Buzzcocks split.
Yeah.
Was that actually the Buzzcocks? Was that going to be their 4th album, or is that a myth?
We'd come back from America. We was in the studio supposed to, get our demos together. Because by this time, me and Pete, we got these little porter studios where you could record 4 tracks on a cassette. So I recorded 8 tracks, and then he was supposed to record. And I think he had about 3 songs on his. So what are you doing, Pete? But he had too many people around his house at that point, I think. He was like, where's the songs? Anyway, the producer at the time, Martin Russian, was stuck in New York. So for 3 days, we're hanging around the studio. And I said, where's your songs and stuff? He said, I haven't got many really and all that. I said, you're supposed to have these. We're doing this. We had just come back from a massive year's tour and a long tour in America. And I think he was a bit exhausted as well. But so I said, well, what have you got then? And there was an acoustic guitar. I said, well, play me. And he played me Homo Sapien. So that would have been on the Buzzcocks album, the actual song. I don't know about the rest of it, though. Maybe another one off there, but it didn't really have the songs really at that point. So that wouldn't have been. But, we actually did Homo Sapien in Coachella. That's the only time Buzzcocks ever done it. The bloke wanted to hear Homo Sapien. And I did a song called something off my solo album as well to balance it up. So that's the only time, But it would have been, the actual track would have been. But he went away to do the demos. The drum machines had just come out and all that, And he made it electronically, like with the gear the Human League used, So you didn't really need a band, But it was an electronic album, wasn't it, really? So the rest of it, I think he wrote there, So it's supposed to be Buzzcocks demos, but it all quickly changed, really,
Brilliant, thank you. And Lipstick and Shot by Both Sides, is that the same riff?
Yeah. Well, when Howard left, we were still rehearsing in his basement for about another week before we actually sort of parted company a little bit more. And Howard came in. We're rehearsing this song, Lipstick, down, with the riff. And Howard came in and said, do you mind if I borrow that riff? I was like, yeah, okay. And so he borrowed the riff. And the next thing we hear, is Shot by Both Sides, which is a great song as well. It's like,
Yeah.
2 songs out of one riff, He came in and asked to borrow a riff. That's what happened.
I mean, Steve, thank you so much for your time. It's been a joy.
You're welcome. Been a pleasure. And let's write some more pages for the next book. Been a pleasure, man.
Cheers, Steve.
Pleasure. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
What do you get when love turns around? The state is just the hate in your mind. You say that you know me, but something the state in your mind. You say that you know me, but some things are easy to find. When love turns around you, when love turns around you.
Well, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Now, as you know, we do our research from a variety of sources, but if you want to add any more detail for us, or even correct us on anything, then please do get in touch with us. Where can they get in touch with us, Noel?
They can contact us on our email address, which is unchartedsoundspodcast@gmail.com.
And of course, you can also get in touch with us on our Facebook group, the Uncharted Sound group, as well as our Facebook page, the Uncharted Sounds page. Thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you.